You said about the changes of attitude within the BBC to what you were doing.
Yeah.
I guess it's also changed attitude of the viewers and the audience, because it changes your responsibility, I guess, towards them, because if they're coming to you with information, they expect something in return.
I think what we found and we continue to find is that this may change. I mean, Chris Crane was talking about people's attitudes changing at a conference earlier at the end of last year. But I think what we found so far is that people who've been witness to or have been part of a big story simply just want to tell their story. Now, clearly, we do have there are some interesting aspects that we need to be, so initially in terms of kind of questions about payment and all that kind of stuff. The overwhelming, the vast majority of people simply want to tell their story. I mean, the motivation, I can quote you example after example after example where people say, I just want to share the story. And to be honest, one of the biggest platforms, well, if you want to share your story, who are you going to share it with? The BBC. I mean, it's a huge advantage for us, the fact that, from me in my operation and what we're trying to do, that we are the BBC because we have a trusted reputation, we have a global presence. There are other issues in there, yes, absolutely, of course, about whether we would never ask anybody to do anything. We never really commission anybody, frankly. I mean, we're much more interested in accidental journalism or acts of accidental journalism than we are specifically in commissioning people to go off and do stuff. We are extremely conscious that we never ask anybody to do anything that might put them in danger or break the law. I mean, clearly it's not always quite as straightforward as that if people are sending you stuff from the streets of Tehran. But we're very conscious in dealing with them. I mean, there was a period of time when we felt it wasn't appropriate to phone people up in Tehran because their phones were being tapped. We had conversations we had IM conversations with people who described how they were taken from the street and beaten up because they had their mobile phone cameras with them. We had contact with someone who had spoken to us previously and had then subsequently been picked up by the police and been put in prison for some time. So we are extremely conscious and extremely careful about how we conduct ourselves in those kind of situations. It's absolutely essential.
I guess also, sorry, I just want to say a little follow-up thing, was just that people might send you information, say people stuck in a tsunami or in a particular war zone, I'll send you information almost asking for help from you. Is it you have to then draw the line and say there's nothing we can do, I'm sorry, thank you for the information,
but it's not our job. I mean, even on the Have Your Say message board, if we have clear protocol of what we do, but it's not our job to intervene. And if someone's emailing us saying, I'm feeling suicidal, I'm going to go and jump off a building, or I'm going to take some pills, it's not our job to talk people down. What we do in situations like that is direct them to professionals, and that's the kind of approach that we would have in those kind of circumstances. I mean, we would never encourage people to stay in a dangerous place, ever.
I was just wondering about when you're using social media in particular, are you conscious of there being one particular audience and therefore one viewpoint that might have more dominance within that social media? So for example, when Tehran happened, Twitter was obviously very important in the reporting of that story. But you would have a young audience potentially there who were using who would have one opinion.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well,
and how do you balance that?
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. That's absolutely clear. I mean, a starker example of that is the response to the BNP question time. If you looked at what the Twitter hashtag was saying compared to the audience on the BBC Have Your Say,
it's vastly different. It's
just like, are we watching the same programme?
Yeah.
So yeah, we are absolutely aware of the context in which we are finding this information, and we know very well that in the Iranian situation that the content almost exclusively will be coming from the.
How do you manage that in terms of how you present it?
It's about transparency. It's about transparency. It's about saying. It's about giving our audience the information to say, it's two things. When we're making editorial decisions about how we use the content and what we do with it and the context in which we place it, we're aware of the context in which we're getting that kind of information. So therefore, we're asking questions about its veracity, its validity, what it's really saying.
And it's a matter of presenting it in context. And
we then present it in context, and we give our audience the as much information about that as we can and as appropriate. I mean, one of the great saying now is we've moved on from we don't own the news anymore to transparency is the new objectivity, and that's what it's all about. It's about giving the audience that information.
I was interested in that comment, editorialising. I mean, how is it still a case of telling the story as you believe that the general public should need to see it, or I mean, how much editing?
Well, I think increasingly I think our job is to kind of curate more generally. I mean, that breaks down in lots of different ways. I think it's our responsibility as BBC journalists. I'm not going to speak on behalf of anybody else. I think it's anything I say is framed in that context to present an impartial and clear presentation of the facts as we can establish them. And I think that's clearly an increasingly, I would argue, an increasingly important role in as everything fragments and people have access to, they can voice their own opinion on Twitter, they can write their own blogs, they can do whatever they like. But I think our role in providing an accountable and authoritative view or report on what we think the story is, I think is increasingly important. I think our job is also to point to good stuff, point to the good stuff and the best stuff out there. I don't think we should feel we should necessarily have to own it and bring it into our own platform. But we point to the best stuff and the good stuff. And it's helping people think through that as a kind of a trusted guide through a lot of that. And I think that's an essential role. I mean, a good example of that is the way that people responded, people behaved in the Michael Jackson story. I mean, again, it's a well-known path. Where did you first hear about Michael Jackson? I heard about it on Facebook and on Twitter. What do they do next? They then go and find other sources of information to give themselves more information and to give themselves some accountable and authoritative sources. I mean, that's the conundrum of questioning all the time about how accountable and how authoritative are social media sources. You build a reputation. Well, the BBC has got a reputation. We've been in the business for 90 years or 70 years, however long it is. And we can, we know that if we start putting stuff out that's nonsense, it's no good. That's not always the case with other social media sources, because your mate tells you it's true. How often do you believe your mate?
Hardly ever.
Well, there you go. There you go.
Present company accepted.
Yeah, but he read it from the BBC, so it
what was I going to say? Oh, because we've been looking at video recently in the lesson, and we were talking about it's particularly sort of an American thing to sort of talk over, editorialise it as they're describing the YouTube footage or whatever, just to and almost too much guide the viewer along and actually ruin the impact of the actual video footage itself. I mean, we used the example last week, didn't we, with the Tehran?
Won the award as well.
Yeah. See, that was very interesting. Slight diversion, but that was very interesting. The initial images that went around of Nader, and that are still on most of the agency's books, are not of Nader.
Right.
The woman with the headscarf isn't her, it's somebody else. It's another woman called Nader, but it's not the woman who was killed.
Right.
And was that sourcing through social media, or was that sourcing?
The initial picture of the headscarf, I think, was sourced through social media, through a blog somewhere. I can't remember specifically which one, but our Persian, the people who work at both the Bush House and the Persian TV, were able to contact through more conventional means. Nayla's fiance, who then provided us with the image of her without the headscarf on, and was able to confirm that that image of her with the headscarf on wasn't her. And it's a good example of the dangers of social media and how we operate in the BBC. You know, we work, the two work together, you know, hand in